what type of updates typically give the best kind of return on investment, and which updates are usually a waste of money? What is the first thing a homeowner should do and evaluate before deciding whether or not to update their home that's going to be for sale?
Wow, that's great. It's a really good question. So, the first thing that I do when I go in to look at a home to see what should and shouldn't be done to it is I look at the major systems, right? So while cosmetics are important and they certainly are a good part of selling the home, making sure that the major systems are up to date and ready to go is actually going to help you sell your house a lot faster and be more likely to close, which is what we all want to do. So things like roof, plumbing, the heating ventilation system, the air conditioner, electrical panel, things like that. Just make sure those things are up to date. And once we're past that, then I start looking at the cosmetics of the home, right? Depending on your budget and how much you have or are willing to spend, the absolute essential thing that you must do is clean.
Okay.
I know it seems like it should go without saying, but clean, and I mean deep clean, right? And declutter.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people say depersonalize, like take all of your family photos out and anything that's personal. And while depending on how many you have, that might be true, but you do want to have some of your personality in there. It's okay to have a couple of personal photos and things like that. You just don't want to have walls full of them where somebody can't see themselves living in your home.
Yeah, it makes sense, especially if you have like that ugly uncle.
Well, we all have the ugly uncle.
Exactly. All right, moving on to the next question. How do our 5 categories help our sellers decide how much time and money to invest in the home for updates?
Well, that's again, another really good question. Everything comes down to what your goals are, right? So some people come to us with, I'm going to sell my house sometime in the next 12 months. I'm not in a big rush. I eventually want to do X, whatever that is. And they may want to get top dollar for their home, right? So they're going to say, want to do the right things to get things updated. Maybe it's paint. Usually paint is going to be the next thing above cleaning and decluttering. Maybe some paint, maybe just some light staging, right? So staging doesn't have to mean bringing in all new furniture. A lot of times we can bring a stager in and they can rearrange the existing furniture, take something out, put something small in, move something from one room to another. Not necessarily because it's the better function, but it's just the better aesthetic, right? They have that eye for that. And then maybe they bring in a couple of pieces of art or a piece, a small piece of furniture or something like that. Beyond that, then you start moving into making sure that, things like the kitchen are up to date. It could be simple things like just replacing some knobs, right? You don't have to replace your cabinets necessarily. You don't have to paint your cabinets. Maybe you do if they're, if they're in disrepair, right? But depending on what your budget is and what your time is, we're going to recommend different things. Other people hit us with, I've got to sell my house next month. I'm moving. I inherited it and I only have 6 weeks to get rid of it before I have to go back to Canada. Whatever the issue is, right? Depends on their timing. So we're going to do less and we're going to sell it cheaper so that we can sell it fast for them.
And that goes into multiple one of our numbers where pricing is so important that no matter how much you stage, if you have a certain amount of time to sell, that really is going to affect where you need to be pricing it to.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I think pricing is the key element of the whole thing, right? Because, I tell people all the time, I can sell any house for $1, right? I probably can't sell most houses for $1 million. So the number is somewhere in between. And it's the number that a willing buyer is willing to buy your house for, not what the seller thinks it's worth, not what the neighbor sold their house for, and not what they want it to be, but it's what a willing buyer is willing to pay for that house at that time.
And that's why finding an agent is so important there, especially with staging where you had mentioned that, some agents have tools, I know we do, where you can virtually stage, where, you know, that's even cheaper of an option to be able to get that out there, help people visualize it. Obviously, the best thing that can happen is someone going into a property and being able to see it themselves. So physical staging is going to be better than virtual 100% of the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, there's some really good statistics out there about how much faster a house sells when it's staged properly versus when it's either lived in or vacant, right?
Makes sense.
And so they typically sell faster and they sell for more money.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, next question. For a home that needs significant repairs, how do you recommend balancing the cost of those updates with pricing the home competitively?
Yeah, so usually...
what would be, for our audience, what would be significant repairs? Because some people think, you know, a crack in the backyard is a significant repair and it's just a surface crack and not something major.
Sure. Yeah, a crack in the backyard may be a significant repair because it could be, you know, a sinkhole on its way, right? But certainly again, I go back to big ticket items, right? Things like your roof, your AC, your plumbing. You know, if your plumbing is polybutylene and it needs to be replaced, that's $4,000 to $6,000, right? And they're going to rip up parts of your house to do it, right? So you're going to have holes in drywall, so then you're going to have drywall repair, then you're going to paint the place. So it's time and money to get that done. A roof in Florida is going to be anywhere from $8,000 for a really small house to $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Could be $100,000 for a large house that might have tile roof, right? So that can get pretty extensive. And then a lot of people think, oh, I have to update my kitchen. I think that's, you know, that's the center of the home, right? And it's the most expensive room in the home, right? Typically. So your kitchen is where a lot of people gather. It's the focal point. It's the first place that the cook, usually the wife, is going to be looking, right? Because that's where they're going to spend a lot of time. And so people think that they have to update the kitchen, but you may spend $30,000 updating the kitchen and it may not be completely to anybody's taste other than yours. So if your home needs a lot of repairs, especially if it's more than just one like big thing, I recommend just leaving it as is and selling it cheaper, because you know you leave those people the opportunity to go ahead and do the kitchen themselves, do the roof themselves, do the things that they need to do on their own, whether it's with their own cash or if they can get a renovation loan. So there's plenty of renovation loan products out there, conventional and FHA, that the bank will actually provide not only the money to buy the home, but to also renovate it. With the FHA 203K loan, you can actually get 110% of what is estimated to be the value of the home when it's complete. So you can essentially buy a house with no money down or close to it.
And how would somebody go across trying to find something like a loan like that or something like that?
You know, we have our partner, Bruce Woodburn with Cross Country Mortgage, that has FHA 203K loans, but any good mortgage lender should have those programs available. They are a little bit tougher. It's not the easy loan, right? Yeah. So you have to go out and get contractor quotes. You have to get multiple contractor quotes. And you have to not only get those quotes, but you have to actually use a contractor. So a lot of people say, oh, I'll just do it myself. Well, you can't. Yeah. If you're going to get that kind of loan, right? You have to pay a contractor because the bank is lending you all the money to do the work. And they want to make sure that you're not going to pocket it or do a poor job.
That you're doing it right.
So they want to make sure it gets done right.
So what type of updates typically give the best kind of return on investment, and which updates are usually a waste of money? So obviously we talked about kitchens, we talked about the essentials of getting, you know, insurance and loans, but what would you say like of cosmetic updates?
Definitely the best bang for your buck is paint. There is absolutely no question, because it's cheap. If you do it yourself, right, you can paint a room for $100, right? And that's going to get you your best bang for your buck. Probably the worst thing that you can do is add a swimming pool.
Really?
Yeah, you get maybe 30 to 40 cents on the dollar. So for every dollar you spend, you get 30 or 40 cents back.
So for people who don't know, how much is a swimming pool on average in Florida? Because I was shocked by this when I found out. I had one growing up and I didn't realize my parents had spent this much.
I'm going to bet when you grew up, as young as you are, they weren't near as expensive.
Probably not.
I built a pool on a house that I bought in 2002. We built a pool. And it was only $27,000, and it was a nice a nice little pool. That same pool today would be about $70,000.
Wow.
And it was pretty average, maybe slightly above average, but it wasn't anything extravagant. We didn't have any fire. We didn't have any flares.
Yeah.
You know? We didn't have a lot of fancy stuff. It was relatively small. And yeah, they're really, really expensive right now.
Good to know to save your money. I also know a moderate expense that could give a high return is appliances in some cases, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Appliances, you can get a nice stainless steel appliance package for anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. That's everything. That's your dishwasher, range, your refrigerator, microwave. Not your washer and dryer, just those. You can get it for between $3,000 and $5,000.
And that's not even when sales are happening. If you're selling around Memorial Day or Labor Day, you're getting even cheaper.
There's always sales.
Always sales. All right, so next question that people are asking, and it kind of fits into our first question.
Sure.
How can sellers determine if staging, like we spoke about, is actually going to be worth it for their home, or if it's better to focus that money on structural improvements and cosmetic improvements and those kind of things?
Well, I will say that if you have real structural improvements that are needed, or even heavy cosmetic improvements that are needed, I would absolutely do those first before I spent a nickel on staging, right? Because those are going to give you your best bang for the buck.
Yeah.
Right. But if you have a really nice house and things are good, but it's lived in, it's normal, it's functional, right? But it may not be as aesthetically pleasing as, let's say, when you walk into a new construction model and you see it beautifully staged and decorated, right? Those are not.
You feel like you're living there.
Yeah, but they're not functional, right? They're not exactly how we live, right? But they look beautiful, right? So if you have a really functional house and maybe you have some odd pieces, you have some mismatched furniture, you have some dated decorations and things like that are personal, that might be beautiful to you, but they aren't of appeal to the masses, right? I think that's probably the best time to bring in a stager. And what I usually do is I always try to look out for my clients' dollars, right? So I'm not going to come in ever and say, let's just rip all your furniture out and stage the whole place. That's just never going to happen. I shouldn't say never, but it should never happen. Usually it's, hey, let's start with removing some excess furniture. You've got 7 pieces of furniture in a room that should hold 3, we should probably take some out, put it in storage, put it in the garage, something like that.
And that's a great time to mention a very important fact about staging that I think most people, when they think staging, they always think bringing in. There's something called negative space, which is very important to have nothing in some spaces, because that gives the illusion in some cases that the room is a lot larger than what it is.
It actually shows the room to its true size, right? Because if you have too much packed in there, it feels like you're in a sardine can. So nobody wants to live inside that, right? So you want to go ahead and remove some excess furniture, remove some of your highly personal or dated type items, maybe bring in a few pieces of art and things like that. If you're on a budget from a staging perspective, you absolutely want to focus on 1 or 2 rooms and not bedrooms. So you want to do the living room and the dining room. Maybe they're connected, right? Usually they are these days. So you want to do those 2 rooms. You want to stage the kitchen, believe it or not, right? You're not going to stage it with furniture, but you're going to stage it with things. You're gonna declutter it, right? Because everybody's got clutter in their kitchen.
That one Martha Stewart recipe book you have, put that propped up. It makes it look good.
You're gonna do that little thing. You're gonna put a little, decorative plate up or something. Maybe you're gonna replace all those odd utensils that are from you collected over the years, and just buy a set and
bamboo set, and
even if it's cheap, buy a cheap set, put it there. It looks a lot better than the mix match that might be better stuff. It just doesn't look as good.
That's a quick tip too. With things like Pinterest and Amazon, you can definitely go ahead and create, wish list and a Pinterest board where you have all these different staging things, and bring that to your realtor and say, what would be smart for me to use? We, at least us, we love to, talk with you and work out what's right for your individual situation. And that's important whenever finding an agent in general, is working with your situation.
Yeah, I would say the biggest, and I know you didn't ask me about the biggest mistake, but
That's actually the next question.
Is that the next question?
Well, we'll go into it.
All right,
what are the biggest mistakes when sellers make when preparing their home for sale, and how can they avoid them?
Got it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why I thought that was going to be the next question, but
it's like you can see the future.
It's like I can see the future. But well, you asked about the saving tips thing, right? So I think the biggest thing that people do is they make assumptions and they go out and spend big money on things that are not going to get them impact. And probably the biggest thing is replacing the cabinets and or the countertops in their kitchen when it's not needed.
Interesting. So do you see people getting, return on those at least?
Usually not.
Really?
Yeah, unless they're in severe disrepair.
Okay.
Right? Because so it's kind of like this. Does a brand new kitchen add value to the home? Sure. Not that much though.
Okay.
Right? Does a disrepaired kitchen reduce value of the home? Absolutely, right? So if you look at the kitchen, you go, oh my gosh, I could not imagine cooking a meal here. That's a huge negative.
Yeah.
But if it's a nice kitchen that just got remodeled, you're like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
This is doable.
It's not, I have to spend an extra $100,000 just to live here. Right?
Makes sense.
You might look at that kitchen and say, I'll do that in the next renovation that I buy, but you're not necessarily going to overpay.
It's just versus I need it.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, well, thank you for that. So next one, why is unpolished potential such a sweet spot for sellers, and how can they make the most of it?
Unpolished potential. So, if you are able to, in the description of the property, if you're able to talk about things that could be done to it, if you're able to use virtual staging, as you pointed out earlier, maybe you've got a vacant home so you can show it staged. Mm-hmm. And one of the tricks that we do on that is not only do we put those pictures on the MLS, but you can also put those pictures on the wall in the room itself, so that to say, like, this is what the room could look like if it was staged, right?
Interesting.
So somebody that didn't necessarily look at that picture or remember that picture, right, from the MLS that they saw, they can see and say, wow, I would have never thought of putting the room this way.
Yeah.
So they get to see it as if it could be.
Kind of like when you watch something on HGTV like House Hunters, where they do that really cool like view of the room and then everything changes.
Right.
It's like that without spending all the money and the effort.
And there are companies out there that can do that for you, right? So you could, if you really had something that was a diamond in the rough, we could go out and pay somebody to do that kind of transformation for you virtually, to say, hey, this is what, the plan is, right? You could put that plan together. You can get an architect to do, the work needed, right? And say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And the estimate from the general contractor is $70,000, and we've reduced the price of the home by X. The biggest problem with trying to sell a property that way is price. Because, so let's say the house should be worth $400,000. Let's just use that as a number. If it was in very good condition, nice, nothing really needed, let's say it was a $400,000 house, but it needs $100,000 worth of work, right? The seller is going to want to sell it for $300,000, right? Because they're like, oh, well, it's $100,000 worth of work. I should be able to sell it for $300,000. Well, the buyer is buying a project.
And they're going to need to spend how much time and all that money?
It's going to be time, effort, energy, headaches, and risk. What if it's not $100,000? What if that GC is wrong? That never happens.
What if materials go up?
Materials go up.
Of your
absolutely. So you never know about those things, right? So it's like, well, I think it's going to be 100, so I better bet it's going to be 140, because that's usually what happens, right? Yeah. That 100 becomes 140. So I want to get it cheaper. Then I've got to factor in all my time, effort, and energy. Now, at the end of that, I have the product that I want because I'm the buyer, right? But why did I do all that? Well, I wanted a value, and I wanted to be able to add value and make money when I bought, right?
Versus making it sellable.
But that's where the challenge comes in for the seller, because they not only do they want to get $300,000, but if they price it at $300,000, they're saying, oh, I'll leave room for negotiation, but the buyer buying it may not even make an offer.
So that's why when we say unpolished potential, I know that it's more of an industry term than anything. When it comes to, some people might not know it. Sometimes not doing things is the best thing to do, and acknowledging that.
So if you're going to do a property like that, my suggestion, if you can do it as a seller, a lot of people don't have the stomach for this, but list it really, really cheap. List it so cheap that you get 5, 6, 8, 10 offers. And when you start getting that many offers, your buyers are going to get fear of missing out. They're going to get that FOMO, right? So they're going to put in a bid in at list price, and then somebody else is going to come in at 205, and somebody's going to come in at 210. And, you know, next thing you know, you're a realtor, as what I would do is start with the lowest one, tell them that they need to go up to whatever the highest one is and see if they'll do it, right? And then go to the next highest one and tell them they need to beat that one. And then just keep doing it, do a round robin, making a whole bunch of phone calls and talking to a whole bunch of agents, and just let them inch their way up. I might get you that 300,000 you were looking for, because you find somebody that is afraid to miss out on that property. They fell in love with it for some reason, and they fear not getting it.
Makes sense. Makes complete sense. Okay, next question. What is your advice for sellers on when to stop updating and just focus on pricing the home correctly? I know we've kind of gone into this a few times, but I think this is a little bit more direct of a question.
Yeah.
You know, when is just the pull off the Band-Aid and just say, you know what, the time, and I know that that's probably going to be part of your question too, the time, the energy, the money.
So the best time to sell your house is the first week it's on the market. So I don't mean the best time to sell your house time of year wise. I mean, if you're going to get the most money, it's usually in the first week you have it on the market. So price it below where you think you want to land. So again, we'll go back to that $400,000 house. Don't list it for 400, list it for 390. Because you list it for 390, it's worth 400, maybe it's worth more. You're going to get fast offers. Your first offer is usually your best offer. Not necessarily the best price, but it's usually your best offer. They're strong, they're ready to go. They've got a compelling reason because it hit the market, they're ready to go. So they're gonna come in, they're gonna make an offer of some kind. You can negotiate back and forth. Maybe you get 2 or 3 offers because you priced it a little low. You get that little bit of negotiation going back and forth with those multiple buyers. And you go ahead and get your house under contract quickly and get it sold. Because if you try to sell it for 420, instead of 400, and you go, well, I'll have room to negotiate. You're going to sit on the market 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And as the longer it sits on the market, the more people wonder what's wrong with it. What's wrong with it, right? There's something wrong. Why it wouldn't be sitting on the market this long if there wasn't something wrong with it, clearly.
Too good to be true.
Exactly. So, so then they start looking for that when they go in there. Instead of looking at the house from how nice is it, they're like, I wonder what's wrong. Right?
Makes sense.
And they're looking around for why hasn't it sold yet? I get that question all the time. Anytime a property sits on the market 60, 90 days, what's wrong with it? What's going on? What's the story? Right?
Makes sense. I think another, tip that you can really say there too is that I didn't realize until I worked with people frequently on finding properties to buy. People have set parameters of what they're expecting to and are comfortable looking to pay, or that they're pre-approved for. And it's not that they can't go more than that, it's that that's their search criteria. So you could have 3,000 houses that are in your search criteria that are just $1 off of what their search could be.
Sure.
But by pricing at a place like that 390, 395 even, you're getting under the 400 threshold, which is allowing you to have so many more people look at your property. So that's a sweet spot too, I know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we always look in bands. Now, when I'm a buyer's agent, I always go a little bit above what they are approved for or what they tell me they're comfortable with, not because I want to sell them something more, but because usually there's some room in that budget, or a property comes on that's priced a little high and we can negotiate it down, or they see it and then they watch it come down over the next 30, 60, 90 days, and then that's where we buy it, right? So I want them to be able to see that ahead of time, right? And some buyers are really good about following their own criteria. Other ones, they tell you that their budget's $400,000 and then they're sending you $500,000 properties. Can we go see this one? And I'm like, well, do you have the money for that? Well, maybe I get a bargain. No, you can't. No. You're not going to get a $500,000 house for $400,000. Not today.
But that is also the importance, like I keep saying, of working with a realtor. We can't, as a seller, you shouldn't think that your buyer is necessarily working with a realtor. That, a realtor might put you in that right sweet spot to know those things are going to go down. But a buyer that's just looking on Zillow, homes.com, realtor.com might not be looking at 400,000 or above. And you are going to miss out on that person that might have serious interest.
Right. Well, that's, so one of the things that I do as a buyer's agent, or I should say as a listing agent, is I always make sure that the buyers that are looking are pre-approved, right? So, we have a requirement that the buyer that is looking at a house be pre-approved for that house, or has the proof of funds, right? To be able to get in there and see it, especially on something that has a homeowner living in it, an owner-occupied home, because we're putting them out of the house for an hour usually, right? Not necessarily that the showing's an hour, but they're gonna clean up, they're gonna leave early, they're gonna go out and have lunch or do something, and then they're gonna come back. Hopefully the showing's done, or they didn't run over or run late, or right, which happens all the time. So you're putting people out and inconveniencing them, and then only to find out, oh, well, we haven't been pre-approved yet, or I don't even have a job, right? So, we always want to make sure that our buyers are pre-approved before we open up the door. Now, if it's a vacant property and they're with an agent, it's not as critical to really be concerned about that, but definitely on an owner-occupied.
So if a seller is overwhelmed with decisions, what is one update or strategy they should be focusing on to make the biggest impact today? This doesn't have to necessarily be renovation or staging. What is the biggest thing that they can basically do to impact this sale for them?
Yeah, so they need to set great expectations of themselves, of the realtor, of the amount of time, effort, and energy it's going to take to sell the home, the inconveniences that they're going to deal with. They really just need to set their mindset that this is a process. We're here to guide them and help them through it, but they're going to experience a lot of trauma. They're going to go through something that most people only go through 2 or 3 times their whole lives.
Makes sense.
Right? Now, I don't necessarily move every day, but I deal with property every day. I'm going through this with people all the time, right? So I don't know how I would be as a customer. I don't know if I'd be any easier as a customer, but because I've been through it so many times, I can see the where we're going and kind of help that seller along the way. Hey, listen, here, I know we're here. We're going to get to here. Here's the next 3 steps, right? So it depends on your personality, how you work with stuff. If you're highly analytical, I'm going to tell you, don't overanalyze things, right? Because a lot of our sellers are very analytical people. Don't overanalyze. It's feelings. It's how we see things, right? Unless you're investing, right? That analysis doesn't matter.
Makes sense.
And then, if you're highly emotional, hopefully you have a partner that isn't. Usually that's the case when you have a couple. So hopefully you do have a partner that isn't, and that make the right point person the point person, right? The person that gets highly emotional, that is always going to break down and worry about everything, shouldn't be the point person for the real estate agent, because I'm going to be delivering good and bad news constantly.
Makes sense.
And you want to be able to take it without getting super emotional about it.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Tom. This has been a lot of different information. So if you've appreciated it, please make sure to hit that like button, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can always know when we're making new videos like this, giving you information, making things at ease, whether you're buying, selling, or investing. We are the Florida Real Estate Insider. I've been Gabriel Burgos.
And I am still Tom McNamara.
And we'll see you next time.
I am still Tom McNamara.